Welcome back to movementprofessional.com. So last week I went over a video assessing the supine position broadly. We talked about the posture of it, we talked about breath control, and then we talked about different ways to progress it using leverage and pillars of support. Today I wanted to take a deeper dive into the breath control component because that can be vast and I think it's really important to go over. So we'll get Corey here in supine again, and then we're going to touch on three components of the breath. One is location. So while Corey's lying there, I'm going to use the skeleton here to just demonstrate some of the areas we're going to go after. So right under the rib cage here on the base here is where the diaphragm is. We can think of this as like the center portion of the breath. So what we're looking to do on every inhale is have the diaphragm drop down, and that's going to create a cascade of pressure, ideally down low. So there's all different ways to breathe, but what I want to assess is that the breath can really be moved from low to high. But we're going to start looking at it low, so if we can see some pressure down into the pelvis, even into the lower back. So when supine, we're going to look more at the front, like anterior motion, or the belly moving up towards the ceiling. And then we're going to look at the ribs too, to see if the ribs can go wide. This would be bucket handle breathing. And then we'll move up to the sternum here and see if the sternum can go up towards the ceiling or anterior as well. So those are going to be the three main areas that we look at on Corey. And then we also just want to make sure there's some things that aren't happening, and we don't want the shoulders to elevate. When Corey inhales, we don't want the belly to move in, we want it to move out. So the general location though is we're going to look low in the lower belly around the belly button. Then we're going to look a little bit higher around the lower ribs to see if they're moving wide or in a kind of 360-degree angle. And then we're going to look up here in the sternum. And then we'll use different props to be able to give some feedback for that. So I'm going to use my hand at first and just see if Corey can inhale through the nose and lift my hand. And then as he exhales, all I want him to do is just drop down. So this is just, we're looking at location first. Like, can he move the pressure down into my hand? And can he get that direction of inhalation is expansion, exhalation is there's a compression or a general just relaxation inward. Okay, so he's doing a pretty good job with that. All right, then we're going to look up here at the lower ribs. So I'll just have my hands wide here, and I just want Corey to breathe wide into my hands on the inhale. And then on the exhale, I'm trying to feel the ribs go down and in, down and in. Okay, so I'm not giving him any feedback right now of like how long I want him to breathe for. I just want to see how well he does it. Obviously, Corey's well practiced, so this is kind of easy to see that he knows where to breathe. But you're going to get a lot of people that are going to not be able to inhale in a manner that moves pressure down low. They're going to be moving pressure all up high. So it's good to be able to assess that. So go ahead and show the opposite, the paradoxical breath. So when he inhales, now his belly's going in, and then when he exhales, there's going to be this pressure kind of moving out. So that's the first thing we want to notice, and that makes the ribs kind of go up as opposed to go wide when he inhales. All right, so we're just looking at if that's what's going on here. All right, and then if he does well with the belly, he does well with the lower ribs, and I'm just going to see if he can move his sternum up into my hand, and then as he exhales, it just sort of just falls down naturally. All right, now as we start moving from belly to ribs to upper ribs or sternum, we want to make sure that he still is able to get pressure down low. So it's sort of like filling a glass. He's going to be able to still move pressure into his belly, still move the ribs wide, but also be able to move pressure up into the pump handle or the sternum here. So it's not that he forgets about what he did down lower, it's just that he keeps adding layers. It's like he's going to the next round in a video game. Okay, and then he comes back down. Good. So we can even have one hand on the abdomen. So first he's going to move the hand on the abdomen, then he's going to move the hand at the sternum, and he does a good job through there. The other thing I can assess, and this is a pretty common compensation, is if he's starting to breathe pretty well in the belly, I also want to see if he can move a little pressure down into my hand, as if he's moving front and back. So he wants the belly to move to the ceiling, but can he also move his back into my hand back here? And that's a little bit harder for people. Sometimes that's easier to feel if he gets a little bit of a bend in his knees. Now his back's going to be a little bit flatter. So I have one hand on top, one hand on bottom, and I want him to breathe into both the top and bottom hand. Okay. And I can do that also if I'm looking at the width of the ribs. I might move my hands more to the back side of the ribs to see if he can move them wide, but also into the ground or into my fingers. All right, so that's that's the location of it. We're looking for like a 360-degree breath at the belly, at the ribs, and then we want this front to back motion also at the chest and the thoracic spine. All right, so once he can do that, then we'll start to think about duration. And that usually I'll just start somebody with seeing if they can do a 3-second inhale and a 6-second exhale. If I know that they're pretty advanced with breathing, I might bring that up to something like a 4-7-8 count, where you're breathing in for 4 seconds, holding the inhale for 7, and then breathing out for 8. Any of the counts are usually fair game. You usually have to see where people start from. So as I'm assessing the location, I'm usually getting a sense of what someone's baseline is for how quickly or rapidly they're breathing. If it seems like it's pretty rapid, I'm not going to start them with a really drawn out count. I'll really start them pretty low. Generally, the rule of thumb, though, is I want the exhale to be longer than the inhale, and I'll usually start someone with a 1-to-2 ratio inhale to exhale. But there's a lot of different variables there. You can go into box breathing, which is the same amount of time on the inhale, the retention after the inhale, the exhale, and the retention after the exhale. So it would be, say, 5 seconds breathing in, hold for 5, 5 seconds breathing out, and then hold for another 5 after the exhale, and repeat that. So this becomes a nice way to actually give exercises for breathing to see where people's baseline are, and then get them to extend out all phases of the breath. All right, the third component then that we're looking at would be intensity. So we can use the breath, once we get the direction of it or the location, and we get more control over the duration, we can now decide, do we want to make this a relaxing endeavor, or do we want to turn it into more tension that would be utilized for strength training, core bracing, etc. So at first I want to start someone with the relaxation idea, where I'm just going to have Corey breathe into my hand, and then the sound of the exhale, this time I'm going to tell him to open his mouth and give a and you could hear that that's a more relaxed breath. What I'm feeling in my hand is he's not really creating a lot of tension in his abdomen. Now, there are times where we're going to want him to be able to create that tension. So this time, what I'm going to ask him to do is breathe in, and I want you to make a hiss sound as you exhale. And now I feel more abdominal tension. And the sound of the hiss will be basically like a volume knob turning the tension up or turning the tension down. So this time, do a hiss like that, just a soft hiss, so a little bit quieter. All right, so not as much tension. But he could still breathe out for the same duration that he did when we were just relaxed. All right, so this time I want it to be a more aggressive hiss. All right, more tension. And I can do a little bit of tapping here to just try to facilitate the effort of the abdominals. Okay, all right, the other way that we can look at doing this is just a brace where he holds his breath. So I'm going to tell Corey, because he knows how to power lift, I'm just going to tell you breathe in, and then I want you to brace, so you start getting skinny, but just push your tension right into my finger. So he's holding his breath now, but he's doing it for the purpose of making tension here, and then let go and relax. All right, so he does a really good job of that. He's well practiced, but a lot of people have no ability to do that at first. So just lying in a position where you're safe, the posture is controlled by the supine position, it's a really good way to teach bracing. We can also put a weight belt on and have them breathe into a belt and kind of breathe around the belt, so they get the sense of how much they're drawing in or how much they're bracing around that pressure. So that would be the third component, intensity. And I like to think of this as a continuum. There's a couple different places where you could pressurize the exhale. You can pressurize it through the glottis, which is the more open mouth sigh. Then you can do it through the teeth, which Corey did with the hiss. You can also do it through pursed lips, which is very common in Pilates, where you're blowing out through pursed lips. And then you can just, again, create a Valsalva where you're just holding everything. So you're pressurizing and not really allowing anything out. And usually we'll do that through maybe the most intense part of a movement, where you're moving either really fast or really heavy, but you're doing it purposely and trying to maintain the pressure down low, either in the abdomen or around the lower rib cage. All right, so that would be the way that I look at assessing breath control in the supine position. You're not necessarily doing this all the first day, but those are all the components you at least want to have as a checklist as you're going through your assessment with a client over time. Hopefully that makes sense. If you have any questions, you can go to movementprofessional.com. I'll see you next time.